the game.
Hi, I'm Kelsa Dickey, the CEO of the Financial Coach Academy and my financial coaching business, Fiscal Fitness Phoenix. My coaching journey began more than a decade ago with me helping people for free from my dining room table. What was once a little business of mine has grown into a 7-figure company that employs a team of people. My goal is simple, to help you fall more and more in love with financial coaching. I believe financial coaching is the most rewarding way to make a living. If you are an aspiring financial coach or have been coaching for years, I'm here to help you create a business you love that gets your clients massive results. Let's get to it. Hey, Coach. Welcome to episode 93 of the Financial Coach Academy podcast. As you're listening to today's episode, which we're going to get to in just a little bit, I want you to think about how you're currently marketing and growing your business. How are you gaining new clients? Maybe it feels like you're trying to do it all. Here's the thing. Getting new clients doesn't have to feel like a constant hustle. That's exactly why we created the Client Creator Challenge. It's not about working harder or doing more of what isn't working. It's about building a client attraction system that actually works for you. Past participants in the Client Creator Challenge have seen real results. We're talking multiple new clients in a single week, coaches booking their first 6-month packages, and best of all, they finally feel confident in the marketing strategy that they're using. No more second guessing your posts, no more exhausting yourself with cold DMs, just clear, practical steps to create a consistent flow of clients who are excited to work with you. If you want to be the first in line to register when the Client Creator Challenge opens for 2025, head over to financialcoachacademy.com/Client Creator Challenge to join the wait list. Let's make your acquisition strategy actually work for you, not against you. So for today's episode, I am thrilled to introduce an incredible professional who joined my team just about a year ago. Her name is Nora Sudduth. Nora is a business and marketing advisor with over 25 years of experience in driving both top-line growth and bottom-line efficiency. She's helped businesses generate over $500 million in sales and has designed courses, coaching, and certification programs that have generated millions more. From marketing, positioning, and messaging to offers and sales strategies, Nora specializes in crafting brand messaging and customer conversations that connect and convert. She's consulted on thousands of marketing campaigns, helping businesses have authentic, compelling interactions with their clients. Nora is also the co-founder of Hello Audio, the leading platform that enables businesses to increase reach, engagement, and conversions by delivering on-demand private podcasts. We use Hello Audio in our business with incredible success, so make sure you check it out. Nora provides me with strategic insights. She is helping me to develop high-value assets, so just wait to see what we have in store for you later this year, Coach. Today, Nora is going to wow us with her expertise so you can feel less overwhelmed, embrace simplicity, address value fatigue with authenticity, and deepen connections through your client conversations. So, Nora, hello, welcome. No pressure, but we've got a lot to cover in 30 minutes. Do you feel up for this challenge or what?
We do. Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I am excited. So I want to start by talking about value fatigue. So let's just first start. What is value fatigue and why is it particularly relevant for financial coaches?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say value fatigue is something I've seen more over the last maybe 18 to 24 months. And it's this phenomenon when consumers are becoming a lot more desensitized and disengaged just because of the sheer amount of content and offers that they're being exposed to in the marketplace. When you have so much content and so many offers that are out there, consumers are really starting to question the worth of these resources. And it's really hard for them to discern which offers are actually better than others just because of the sheer volume of what they're being exposed to.
Yeah. And what signs might indicate that potential clients are experiencing value fatigue? How does a coach know if that's what they're bumping up against?
Yeah, you're going to see it with lower engagement rates. So that might be lower engagement rates on your content. It could be fewer emails that are getting opened or less interaction on social media. You might also notice that it's just becoming a lot more difficult to get leads and sales. If you have sales calls, if you have sales conversations in your business before, if you're selling coaching packages, for example, you might see prospects just expressing more hesitation, or prospects are needing more reassurance in order for them to invest. Those are typically the things that we're seeing in the marketplace right now.
Yeah. And so what do we do about it? What are some of the tactics that we can employ in order to overcome it?
Absolutely. So this is probably one of the most common things what we've been taught. So marketing, a lot of marketing experts have taught us that if something isn't working, it's probably, you just need a new tactic, or you need a new funnel, or you need a new flywheel, or insert strategy or tactic here. And it's interesting because it's like, oh, you just need to post more on social media, or you need a new offer. And the reality is, all we're doing is just feeding the noise when we're continuing to do things like that. It's really what it's coming down to, and how we're going to break through this, how we're going to actually get past value fatigue and reach people, is with authentic conversation. So authenticity and connection. If we are not going to be, we have to be able to connect with the consumer in order for them to convert. So it's not about the tactics. It's not about a new funnel. It's not necessarily about a new offer. It's really about how is your messaging connecting with the human being on the other side of the screen.
Yeah, this is a little bit of maybe a two-part question, because I think they maybe go hand to hand. So what advice do you have for coaches who feel like they need to be on every marketing channel to stay competitive? And at the same time, what steps can they take to streamline their strategies without feeling as if they're sacrificing effectiveness?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting because I think as a business owner, we do get a little bit of FOMO, or we start to compare ourselves to what other people are doing, and we do feel like we need to show up on all the platforms, and you don't. Let me just put it's a myth. It's not true. You don't. And I would say the platforms where your people are going to be most receptive to your messaging, or the platforms you should be on. And it might just be starting with one. I would much rather you be on one platform and having consistent, authentic messaging than for you to try to be on 5 different social media platforms, for example, and all you're doing is surface level messaging. And not that there's nothing wrong with inspirational quotes. There's nothing wrong with, some of those
Tips and tricks.
tips and tricks. But if all you're doing is flooding people's feed with that kind of level of content, we're not likely going to break through to really form the connections that are going to move people toward the conversion.
Yeah. So let's shift towards talking about authenticity, because I do think that it sounds like the common theme of what you're talking about here. So how do you see authenticity playing a role in cutting through value fatigue and then really resonating with potential clients? And what practical ways can coaches showcase their authenticity in their interactions with their marketing?
Absolutely. If you think about what we are typically taught about marketing, it's always about the funnel. Or, that's most marketers will talk about, or business owners are focused on the funnel itself, or the flywheel, or marketing campaign. Lots of different words for the same exact thing. And if you think about what a funnel actually is, it is a container that delivers a message. It delivers a conversation. So think about if you met one of your ideal clients at your local coffee shop and you had a genuine conversation with them, right? That conversation is what you're trying to deliver in a funnel. But a lot of times we lose sight of that. We lose sight of the fact that we're literally delivering a conversation through this vehicle. And instead we get caught up on, well, which template should we use? And let's work on the swipe file, or maybe it should be a webinar or a challenge, or emails, or so. Like, it's just for a minute, take the vehicle or the container out of it. It doesn't, at the end of the day, a lot of times the vehicle that you deliver it in, the funnel, the webinar, all of those things is not nearly as important as the conversation itself. And so if you could let go of all the tactics and how you're going to deliver the conversation, and just focus on the actual conversation itself and really nail that, no matter how you choose to deliver that conversation, your conversions will be higher.
I have no doubt. I think about this all the time, Nora, that I am so grateful that I started my business when I did, before social media was what it is today, because I genuinely just started by having conversations. And then that really informed so much of my marketing and my brand and the things I post about. And I can't imagine ever getting sort of like an offering where it's like, here's 30 days of posts for your Instagram or something like that. And I feel like that would stifle my creativity personally, because so much of my creativity comes from conversations, like real world, real life conversations. So I love that. And I do think that this also, authenticity and trust and credibility, they really all play together. They're all super important. So what are some foundational elements of building trust and credibility that are sometimes overlooked? Because I do think it's important to be authentic. That doesn't mean sort of free reign to post whatever you're thinking that day either, right? So it needs to be through this lens of being authentic while also building trust and credibility. So what are some ways that coaches overlook that?
Absolutely. I think when we think about building trust with someone, I think some of the things that immediately come to mind are like testimonials or social proof, right? Because I'm demonstrating that my methods work, or that my coaching is effective, or that I'm able to help my clients get results. Because there's a level of trust that goes, but what that actually is what people are looking for in your offer. If you look at the things that people are truly looking for when they purchase something, is certainty, right? People pay for certainty. Now, we can't guarantee success as a coach, because as a coach, we're getting work done through others. We can't guarantee that they're going to do the work. We can't necessarily guarantee that they're going to show up. We can do all the things we can to make that success as likely as possible. But when people are trying to invest in a coach, they are looking for a level of certainty. And the things that are in your offer, yes, testimonials and endorsements and your results kind of speak for themselves, but also your ability to demonstrate your expertise and shift their beliefs along the way. Now, I'm going to talk in a minute here about my customer conversation framework, and I'll kind of walk you through what that looks like. But when you're really having that conversation with a consumer, it is about leading with empathy. It is about when that conversation starter, so that they understand that you understand what they're going through. We have to have common ground with someone. It's a lot of times when you look at marketing tactics or swipe files, or maybe some of the recommended phrases or headlines that marketers will tell you to use, sometimes they're overhyped, which is going to be lost. And I think people, and even yourself, think about the headlines that you're looking at and the things that make you cringe, or the things that make you kind of are like you're repelling, or you're kind of pulling back a little bit because they seem either too good to be true, or things that are maybe out of sequence, and they're putting things in front of you that you don't believe yet, or things that you haven't had the epiphany that it's something that you need. And it's all about having the conversation in the right order. And so when you think about architecting a conversation, a lot of times it's just messaging remember when you played dominoes as a kid, and sometimes you would line up the dominoes and like hit the first one and you knock them all over, right? That's exactly what a customer conversation is. And so if we can have these dominoes kind of fall in the right order, then we're a lot more likely to start to build trust. If we're leading with empathy, if we're demonstrating our ability to help them achieve the results that they ultimately want, and then making the invitation, instead of making the invitation, then trying to go back and prove to them that we can do it, or demonstrate our expertise, or make the invitation and then try to back into showing that we understand, or leading with empathy, it's not going to be as effective.
Yeah. And I think just to bring this conversation full circle, it's ever more important to bring certainty and reassurance when there's value fatigue happening, which is absolutely what we're seeing right now in the coaching space. So I also think, and you've touched on this a little bit with sort of like, do this first before you do this and that sort of thing. So when it comes to the sequencing, the order in which we do things, how important is that sequence in your messaging, and what are some common mistakes people make, or what are some, recommendations as far as here's how to think through the sequencing of your message?
I love this. This is a great question. So when I start looking at a customer conversation, I'm going to start with three things. Okay. And I highly recommend that this is very tactical. So get a pencil or get a pen and write these things down, because this is something I would recommend anyone that's a coach and you're selling something, make sure you go through these things. And the first thing is I look at my consumer, my ideal client's needs, their perceived needs, not what I think they need, but what they believe they need in their own words, right? Now, and here's the thing. As a coach, you have a certain level of awareness based on your experience and your expertise that oftentimes our clients do not. They're not there yet. They don't have your level of expertise. They don't have your level of training. They don't have your experience. And as a result, they might think they need something that ultimately, because of your experience, that that's not exactly what they need. But if you try to start the conversation by telling them what you think they need and not meeting them where they're not, that conversation doesn't go anywhere. You have to be able to start the conversation with where they're at. So the first thing I do is I look at, what is your consumer's perceived needs, as what are their known needs that they know about and they believe today. And
Yeah.
the next
And
thing
I'll just add really
sorry, go
quickly
ahead.
that I think it's the perceived need in their words that is super important because, I share this often on this podcast, but also I know you know this, Nora, but, our clients do not walk around saying, I need a budget. They do not say that. They
Nope.
say, I need a plan or I want a plan, right? So we rarely use the word budget in any of our messaging and any of our content, that sort of thing, because it's not the word that they use. And I also say that our clients don't walk around saying, I need help with my money mindset, Now, I can say what you need is a budget, but we'll call it a plan. Okay, fine. And I can maybe observe that, yeah, there's probably some things we can do to boost their money mindset and help them to feel more empowered. But I'm not going to talk about those things in my marketing for my brand because our clients don't walk around saying that. That is not their perceived need, and it's not the way that they speak about it.
That's right. And I think this is a great example. Money mindset is a great example because there's so many people that would say, they would probably be the first to say, I don't have a money mindset issue. It's not a mindset issue. And as a coach,
It's a money problem.
it's, yes, it's a money problem. And any coach listening to this, you're like, yeah, but chances are it's probably a mindset issue. So how do you get across, like, what is the conversation you need to have? You need to start articulating what they're experiencing. So as a coach, if you have a money mindset problem or a money block, then this is how it shows up. This is typically your day-to-day experience. These are the emotions you're experiencing when you think about money, or when you talk about money with your family or friends. Like all of those, now we can use that in our messaging, because your prospect is probably experiencing those things, and they're reading, the copy on your sales page or on your lead magnet, like, yes, oh my gosh, that's me. That's exactly what I'm experiencing. But they're not calling that a money mindset problem. Now we're
Yeah.
using words they can resonate with.
Totally. And so for the coaches that are listening, money mindset, financial freedom, financial
Yes.
independence, financial success, we can't use those terms because, one, they mean different things to different people. We have to describe it. We have to speak to it. We have to talk about what that life would be like if they had financial freedom. Maybe they have choices or they have options, but then actually get even more specific than that. Give very clear examples of, you could make this decision because you have the option to make that decision, right? So you got to be really clear. So, okay, that is number one. I took you away from your 3 steps here. So hopefully people still have their pen and paper. So what's 2 and 3?
2 is beliefs, but it's not necessarily just what they believe today. I want you to think about what they need to believe in order to be most likely to invest in you as a coach or in your coaching. And so that could be beliefs about themselves. It could be beliefs about your brand, about your ability to help them, about maybe the economy, if that's a factor in maybe causing a hesitation for them to purchase. They need to have certain beliefs in order for them to be most likely to purchase. And why do I start there? Because I always begin with the end in mind. I'm always trying to understand, where does that person need to be? What do they need to feel? What is the emotion that I want them to feel, right? To make them most likely to invest in the coaching. And then I go back to those perceived needs, because I'm trying to understand how big the gap is from where they're starting today and what they believe. Because chances are, if you're a coach and you've been marketing and you've been doing this for a while, you know that a lot of times our consumers will come to us and they potentially have some false beliefs. Like, and I'm sure, and this is kind of along the lines of money mindset, but I'm not good with money. That is a belief that some people
Totally.
have. And you could say, but that's not true. But you can't just say that it's not true. That we need to be able to have this conversation with this person, with this human being, to help them believe that on their own. We can't have an epiphany for someone. We can't just say, okay, well, but trust me, like that just doesn't work. We need to be able to have this conversation so that we're saying the things that they need to hear in the right order for them to have the belief that they own, that yes, maybe it's not that I'm bad with money. Maybe I just need this. Maybe I need to approach it differently, or I haven't seen money through this lens, and for them to be most likely to invest. So now we're kind of looking at where they're starting from and where they need to end up so that we can understand how big that gap is.
Yeah, and I think this is so true because I think oftentimes a really great way to boost someone's belief is to give them some simple action steps they can take right away. And when it comes to money, that could be something like how to quickly pay off a little bit of debt or refinance an interest rate or get a little bit more money in savings. But then the takeaway from that I often see in coaches' messaging is that they're highlighting the financial results and they're not addressing like how good it feels and see there's proof that you can do this. There's proof that you can take small actions and win with money, right? That now we're just going to compound that. We're going to gain momentum and that kind of thing. But they gloss over the emotional side and the belief side, and they focus so heavily on the financial result, which is part of it, but a very small piece actually, right? Like the bigger portion is the belief side. All right, so what about number 3?
Okay, number 3 are all the underlying fears that are getting in the way. All right, if you think about what's preventing them, so if they go from your ideal client is going to go from maybe they don't even think they need coaching, or they just know that they're problem aware. They feel like money is a problem for them, and now we're introducing this concept of coaching and financial coaching or money coaching, however you're positioning it to your client. Some people don't even know that exists right now. Right. And so that's and if I start talking about money coaching or financial coaching before I even introduce the fact or create the belief that it's a good thing and that that might help them, that's not going to help me get to that, to the end where we want them to be most likely to invest. But if you think about the underlying fears at each step along the way, what are those underlying fears that are going to get in the way of them moving from one step, whether it's awareness to consideration to decision making to investment? What are those underlying fears? And your messaging should be addressing each and every one of those underlying fears, because as you do that, you create a stronger connection with that person, and ultimately that connection leads to higher conversions. And how do we do that? Sometimes we address it with stats, sometimes we address it with facts, and sometimes we address it with stories. It's stats, facts, and stories. And usually those are the 3 things. Those are the 3 main things that are showing up in your marketing messaging that are going to start to address those underlying fears as they move throughout the customer conversation.
Yeah, one question I want to ask about fears, and you and I have talked about this in length, and is one of the reasons I trust and respect you as much as I do, is your take on sort of fear-based marketing or pain-based marketing. And I know that it plays a role, so if you could just talk briefly about, there is a time and place for it, and it's not to say don't ever do it, but let's just talk about that in a nuanced way a little bit if you can. What is your perspective on fear-based marketing, pain-based marketing, sort of hope-based marketing, all of that?
I am not a fan of fear-based marketing. I think there's a lot of it is overdone. I feel like, there's a lot of average marketers that will rely on really kind of fueling the flame of the pain and really evoking, whether it's like a negative emotion, and you've probably experienced this as a consumer, and you may not realize it, but next time you go through your emails or look at a sales page, I want you to pay attention to the copy, and I want you to think about what emotion that person is trying to evoke. And it might be, I'm seeing there's copy out there that would evoke shame, or the feeling of being behind, or the feeling of being left out. And I'm not a fan of leveraging someone's psychological schemas in order to exploit them. I do think it's important to understand the fears. I do think it's important to understand, where that person might have some emotions around it, but I do it as a way to create a connection with them versus exploit the situation. And I think that's the biggest difference in marketing messaging.
I think one way you and I have talked about it over the years is it's okay so long as it's like, I see you and I hear you and I understand the pain or I understand the fear. It's another thing to, like you said, sort of embolden it or amplify it in some way in order to, or, I think it's like, you need me because you're incapable of doing it on your own sort of feeling.
I hate that.
Right? Yeah, it's so infuriating because I don't understand how you can sort of see the best in people while also tearing them down at the exact same time, right? So, there is a time and a place for it, but it's more from this angle of, I understand how you're feeling, and we're not going to ignore that when we have our coaching sessions. We will make sure that it's part of the conversation around what action steps you should take or what's best for you and that kind of thing. So I do think it's important to talk about it, or at least acknowledge it, but not sort of embellish it, if you will.
Agreed. Yeah,
Okay.
it's about leading with empathy. I mean, your messaging should be empathetic, and it should be empathetic to make sure that you are addressing those emotions. But if you think about that ending point where that person is most likely to invest in your coaching, and you think about what do you want them to believe and what do you want them to feel, do you really want someone buying from a place of shame? And buying from a like, no,
I
you
don't.
don't. You
Right.
want them to be excited and hopeful and thinking about the possibilities. It's a different that. And I will tell you, as someone, I've been coaching and consulting for decades, and that is a different client experience when you have
Totally.
someone that purchases from in that negative emotional state versus someone who is future pacing and thinking about the hope and the results that they're going to be working toward. That it's just a different customer experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to shift now to the customer conversation framework that you were talking about, because I do think this has been a gift to my business. This is something that, for those of you who don't know, I've known Nora for years now. I've consulted with her for years. And but when a few years ago I experienced some growing pains in the business, I've talked about it on this podcast before, Nora was the first person that I reached out to, actually. And this conversation, I sort of describe it, Nora, as like a love letter to my clients, like really feeling as if I understand our relationship in a way, like the role that I play in their life and what the work that we do plays in their life and that sort of thing. But I would love for you to sort of take it from here and just talk about the conversation framework. What is it? What are the key pieces of it? What's the most important thing for coaches who are listening to know about this?
Absolutely. I mean, the foundation of any customer conversation are those needs, beliefs, and underlying fears. If you have not gone through that exercise, that's the first thing that I would recommend every single person do. And here's the thing, is whether you're a new coach or you've been doing this for years, you learn more about your clients the more you interact with them. You learn, and their needs and their beliefs and their underlying fears will shift and evolve because no human being is sitting there static, right? There's things in the economy that are happening. There's things in, depending on where you're serving, like local areas, there's impacts to us all. And so your consumers are not static human beings. And so the more you're staying in touch with them and understanding where they're coming from by having conversations, this gets a lot easier, right? This is something that and it evolves over time. And I think understanding that core, it's the core of the customer conversation. And then if you take a step back and look at how you're messaging, there's like essentially three parts of a customer conversation. And there's the conversation starter. So marketers will talk about this as the hook, right?
Oh.
Or your lead magnet or your ad, or, it's like, but it's the first time people will have interactions with you. And I know this depends on your traffic strategy. For some of you, you might be using social media. You might be using organic social media or paid. Sometimes, we've got paid ads. Some of you use referral-based strategies. So it's whatever your clients might be saying about you to their friends or the people that they're referring to you. Maybe you stand up and do presentations at like a Chamber of Commerce meeting or whatever that is. But think about the first time people are exposed to you. That is your conversation starter. Right? Think about the first thing that you're establishing common ground with them. And so for a lot of your messaging, if your first exposure or that conversation starter is actually something that requires them to believe two different things that we haven't addressed yet, it might not land. Right? It might not land as well. So we always think about that first part as what are those conversation starters?
Or I think they sort of think, oh, she's talking to somebody else. She's talking
yes.
to a different type
It's
of
not
person
relevant
because
to
it's
me.
not right, because they haven't had the belief shift yet, right? So we sort of skipped a step there.
That's true. And that's also why, by the way, for some of you that are realizing that people need to be in your orbit or in your ecosystem a while in order for them to convert, it's likely because they needed to hang on in order for them to build those other beliefs that they needed in order for them to be most likely to invest in your coaching. Normally, it's if we get the sequence right, we can shorten the timeline for people to convert. But if we're not doing the sequencing correctly, or they just need to hang on in your orbit for a while, and they might not be ready yet, and that's okay. But sometimes that is what's happening with some people's messaging, is that they're just not getting the beliefs built or shifted in the right order for them to be most likely to purchase.
Yeah. So conversation starters was one element. What are the others?
Yes. So then I look at the conversation starters, and then we're transitioning into this demonstration, right? And if you think about your conversation as a demonstration, you're a lot less likely to start using words that are more fact or trust me type of things, right? If you think about that, the meat of your conversation is a way for you to demonstrate your expertise, is a way for you to demonstrate how your system, your methodology, your approach is maybe different than others, or why it might be more relevant for them. This is kind of like how you're positioning your unique position in the landscape or the competitive landscape. Every person, right, has we all operate in a competitive landscape, and there's white space for everyone. Okay, I know the
Hmm.
market seems really crowded, but it's about finding the white space in that competitive landscape where your voice can be heard and people will say, "Oh, that's for me." Exactly with what you were saying. It's like, "Oh, wait, that's for me. She's
Hmm.
speaking to me." Right? They're speaking to me. And I think that if you think about the meat of that conversation, sure, yes, all of those things need to build the correct beliefs or shift the false beliefs that they have and address the underlying fears. Essentially, going back to what we just said was the core of the conversation. But that's really the demonstration piece of this. It's not about just saying, trust me or hire me or I'm the best. It's about demonstrating those
This
things.
is if someone's not listening or watching on YouTube, then you don't know that I have this smirk on my face right now the whole time Nora has been saying this point, because I used to say when I sort of woke up one day and was like, oh my God, this marketing is garbage. I hated it. I was saying the phrase like, it's so in your face. That's the wording I was saying. And really what it was is we weren't demonstrating our ability. We were telling people that we had the ability as opposed to demonstrating it. And it seemed so like false bravado or something, like those, trust me, look how cool we are, like all of this. And so I will say, I don't know where this comes from, but confidence doesn't always sound loud is sort of the phrase that
Yes.
I want to give people is demonstrate and allow people to absorb it slowly, I think so much more powerful than like telling somebody what to think or feel.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, that's it.
Okay.
It's about allowing them to have the feeling and
Hmm.
allowing them to create their own belief versus you just saying believe it. And it's you'll see this in I'm trying to think of some examples. Things that say no fluff, right? And you'll see like no fluff or this amazing testimonial. It's like, well, how about you let me read it and then I'll
And
decide
decide
if
if it's amazing.
right? And it's but those things. It's instead of telling people something exactly with what you said, let them experience it and let them believe it. Now, could you create messaging to lead people to it and to pre-frame in order to create or evoke a specific emotion? Yes, you can, but it's not about, like you said, it's not just about saying this is the best system or this is the only system. It's like those overhyped or sometimes oversold messaging, especially with today's consumers. Consumers are smart. I mean, we're
Absolutely.
all consumers listening to this. We all buy things. You're very intelligent. You're very discerning, right? You're looking for specific things that are going to be the right fit and feel for you as a human being and as an individual. And that's exactly what your consumers are doing. And so
Hmm.
by it does a disservice to them by just simply stating things as fact and instead of allowing them to come to those conclusions and establish those beliefs. And quite frankly, it's not as powerful. It's not as powerful. It's so much more powerful if they get there on their own.
Totally agree. So we've got conversation starters, demonstrating expertise or transformation. And what is the
Yep.
third element of your conversation framework?
Yep. It's making an invitation and then following up. I think that's the thing. It's never for those of you that are like, I hate sales. Oh, I hate sales. Like it's and I've heard it all. I don't even know how many sales calls I've listened to and critiqued on the back end of different organizations. It's an invitation. And when you've done the work, usually if I talk to someone and they're telling me that their sales feels gross or disingenuous, that tells me that the front end of their customer conversation isn't doing enough of the lifting, and
Yep.
it's not building the beliefs, and it's not addressing the underlying fears. Because when I get to the point where I'm making the invitation, sure, there's still some underlying fears we've got to work through. Those are called sales objections, and we can work through those in our messaging. But if we're trying to have the sales conversation be doing all the heavy lifting, that's telling me that your marketing, your customer conversation isn't doing enough to help shift or to create the beliefs or address those underlying fears in order for them to be more receptive to that invitation. That's the biggest thing there.
One observation I have, if this is how this might be showing up for some coaches, and the client, I promise you, notices and feels this happening to them. You have a conversation and you spend 45 minutes of it coaching and delivering value and talking about them and the results that they can get and the changes they should make and all of this. And then the 15 minutes, it's a hard pivot. It is like a completely different tone and vibe and everything. And then it all of a sudden shifts to the sales conversation. And the client is experiencing that shift and they're not even settled in it yet. And now you're making an offer to them. So for coaches in the Financial Coach Academy, or if you're not in the academy yet, Module 4, Selling with Integrity, we call this teeing up the sales conversation. Because throughout your coaching conversation where you're talking about the client, there's so many opportunities in that to be teeing up what more you can do for them and what more is possible for them. And just so many ways. We give you tons of examples in that module 4. So please make sure you explore that. Even if you've already finished module 4, go back to it and use it as a refresher because it is so impactful. So you're not creating that hard pivot like Nora is sort of talking about where it's like they're blindsided or we're just not treating it as a full conversation that starts from the moment we talk with them. We're sort of leaving it as it's its own separate piece of the conversation.
It's
right?
So true. Yeah,
Okay.
so true. I think that the biggest thing too, I would say is if you feel like you're energetically shifting or the energy changes or it feels like a different conversation,
Yes.
then it all goes back. It doesn't, again, not the funnel, it's not the flywheel. It doesn't matter what pages or emails or like it's about the conversation. And if you go back to having a mock conversation with a friend, or take out your voice recorder and pretend that you're having a conversation with someone in that local coffee shop, and some of the things that, they might have this objection, and look how natural that probably would feel for you. That's how natural an online conversation should feel if your customer conversation is architected correctly.
I love that. Okay, so last topic, because I know that this is a challenge that some people experience when they're in business. Outsourcing their marketing. So we don't have a ton of time to tackle this, but what advice do you have for coaches who are thinking about outsourcing? And listen, I outsourced. It was great for a little while, and then holy hell, I don't know what happened, but we've talked about it. But also, I will say, we've had one bad experience out of a dozen of really positive marketing experiences when we've outsourced. And so it is possible. I don't want to highlight the times where it's not, but I know people are nervous about this. So how can you ensure that your messaging stays in your voice and your values are preserved and these things that are important? How do you hire somebody, for me, that isn't all about fear-based marketing, right? So how does a coach even just wrap their brain around this? Like, where do they start, Nora?
Yeah. Okay. First and foremost, there's a lot of different things that you can outsource, right? In your marketing, you can outsource social media. You can outsource essentially all the content pieces, right? That you're putting out in front of the world in terms of reaching your ideal client. If you don't have your customer conversation architected, I don't want you to outsource those things, because that's an input to every single piece of content that you are publishing online, from social media to your emails, even if it's a nurture sequence or a newsletter. If you don't go through this needs, beliefs, and underlying fears, those exercises, understanding the conversation starters, how you're doing the demonstration, how you're making the invitation, whether it's sales page copy, your lead magnet, all of those things are rooted in your customer conversation. And chances are probably had people that are listening to this that have outsourced. Maybe social media is usually the first thing I think most people outsource, or they buy templates and it's not converting and they're throwing good money after bad. And it's because the customer conversation is off. And so I would say, no matter what you do, make sure you're focusing on the customer conversation first. Make sure you feel great about what that feels like, how you're speaking with your customers before you even look at outsourcing, because whoever does that, they're not going to know your customers as well as you do. That's just how it works, right? And I want to make sure that when you do outsource or when you do spend the money, it's going to be effective for you. So that's the first thing. Make sure you do that customer conversation
Totally
first.
agree.
But then you get to the question, okay, well, I have copy and messaging that I'd like to write. And so how could I outsource that? And here's what I would say. If you're going to look at outsourcing or hiring someone to work on your messaging, they have to align with your values. So, working with you, Kelsa, it's so easy because we share very similar values, like that we're the exact same. Don't believe in the fear-based marketing. We care genuinely and deeply about our people, and that needs to come through the conversation, right? And so if you're hiring someone, they need to understand your values and they need to approach it in the same way. So if you're the same, if you're similar to Kelsa and you deeply care and it matters, the messaging has to be intentional and you're really wanting to connect, like genuinely connect with your potential clients, then you probably don't want to hire someone who just uses templates and swipe files, right? To be able to generate copy. And sure, there's formulas that copywriters will use that are a good, maybe straw man is the best way, or maybe a good starting point to understand the framework for messaging, but it should never be the end. That's the beginning of the work. And so I would say, when you have a conversation with someone before you hire them, make sure that you're conveying your values and ask them, hey, this is really important to me. How does this show up? How would you approach a project differently? Or tell me about how your method or your approach aligns with my values. And if they can't articulate that, they're probably not the right person for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. In one of the episodes on this podcast, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's the unique value proposition episode. And there's some other really great questions to ask yourself to just better understand maybe what your client might be thinking or what they might be feeling and your role in that, right? And so I just want to invite people to, like Nora is saying, that should be a number one important focus for coaches to lean into that. It doesn't have to be something you get done in the next week, but every week spend an hour just thinking about it, thinking about your client, thinking about having those conversations, or better yet, go out and have the conversations, right? Like that is also a really great opportunity as well. So I really want to encourage that. It's funny that you were talking about, genuinely caring, because I was doing my writing time this morning and I just wrote an email that the subject line is, "It's okay to care." Was essentially the subject line. So, giving people permission to care, that it doesn't make you crazy to care, because sometimes it feels like, man, it'd be easy to not care. Easier sometimes, right? But it would feel less impactful, I think. It would feel less significant. So,
and people feel it. People feel it.
Yeah. And I also want to encourage people to take your time when hiring somebody. So have the conversations about values. Give them a project. Pay them for this, please. Their expertise is important, but pay them for one project to see how it goes first. Do a little bit of a trial run there and make sure that you are seeing things the same way. Also, cautiously use ChatGPT. If you are using ChatGPT and it's not eliciting emotion or it's not sort of speaking to the emotional journey, it's probably not going to resonate. I feel like I can totally tell when I'm reading something that was typed by ChatGPT. If you're using the word unlock in your messaging, I promise it's probably coming from ChatGPT. It loves that word. And it's missing the mark. It's too surface level. It's not going to be emotional enough and that kind of thing. So make sure you either train it to do that piece, right? So after you have that client conversation mapped out, that framework that Nora was just thinking about, make sure ChatGPT knows what those things are so that it can be speaking to them if you're going to use something like that to sort of streamline your process. But Nora, thank you so much. I know this was really helpful for people. You are such an expert in your craft, and I appreciate you bringing a wholeness, I will say, to marketing strategies. I feel like that is something that you have done for me over the years. And so I hope that all the coaches listening really appreciate this as well. Next episode, we're going to be talking about building trust and authority, the power of partnerships. Coaching is all about the application of knowledge. Now that you've learned something new, what do you think about it? How do you feel about it? And what action steps do you want to take as a result? So here is your question for this episode, Coach. What are 1 to 2 ways you will overcome value fatigue in your business? What are 1 to 2 ways you will overcome value fatigue in your business? I'll see you next week, Coach. I believe financial coaching is the best and most rewarding way to make a living. I truly love what I do. If you're ready to learn and see how to become a profitable, successful financial coach, check us out at financialcoachacademy.com to learn more about our online courses, free trainings, and events. As always, I love hearing from you. If you have any questions for the FCA podcast or to share your thoughts on the reflection question from today's episode, go to financialcoachacademy.com/podcast. And if you love this podcast, hit the thumbs up button on today's episode, subscribe, and leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. It would mean the world to me. I'll see you next week, Coach.